my God. How's everyone doing this morning? All right, my name is Cameron Simmons. I'm the youth advocate for restorative justice of Oakland, restorative justice for Oakland youth. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. I love you too. Thank you so much. I've been working with restorative justice for about 4 years now, 4 years as a volunteer, about a month on staff as the youth advocate. So I'm just excited to be here with you guys today. I have the luxury of introducing Ms. Fanya Davis. So here we go. Loving, honest, warrior, and compassionate are just a few words that describe Dr. Fanya Davis. A law graduate of the University of California in Berkeley, Dr. Davis is widely known for being active in the civil rights, Black Power, Black Student Union, women's prisoners, anti-apartheid, and other socialist movements. For the last decade, Dr. Davis has been vastly active in the international restorative justice movement, which has landed her in Oakland, California as the co-founder and executive director for restorative justice for Oakland Youth, or RJOY for short. It is here where she's dedicated her life work in indigenous practice to end school racism and disrupt the school-to-prison pipeline. You guys made me lose my place. Thank you so much. She has done this by facilitating hundreds of circles for teachers, principals, school board members in these native practices, teaching ways to positively interact with youth and building healthy relationships. Dr. Davis continues to knock downs for youth such as myself, even going as far as to give them jobs and internships. I'm sorry. Where they're taught everything from how to apply to jobs to open a bank account and manage money. It is a great honor to be within the reach of Dr. Davis' loving presence and everlasting grace. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. So my name is Liana. I work with RJOY too. I'm also up here to introduce Fanya. I also wrote some stuff down because I forget things. So the first time I met Fanya, she walked with so much grace and poise. She seemed like a woman with a purpose. After spending some time with her, I can tell you she's an absolutely amazing woman, and she's really passionate about this work. She's provided so many opportunities for youth that look like me and act like me and live in my city, and I appreciate her so much for that. Her work inspires so many from her battles as a social justice warrior and a healer through RJOY. She's been an absolutely amazing role model for me. She stands for so many amazing things, and she's teaching me how to push myself and be the absolute best I could possibly be. And I wouldn't want to be standing up here introducing anybody else, so without further ado, here's Fanya.
I think did this come off? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, Liana, and thank you, Cameron. It's really a miracle that Cameron is standing before you here today. He has been suspended over 150 times, arrested multiple times. Most of his friends are now incarcerated or dead from gun violence. He was gangbanging, he was homeless in the 11th grade, and he happened to find a school that had restorative justice where we had a program. And he thrived and he blossomed. So let's give him a hand. And Leanna was suspended multiple times when she was in the 7th grade, solely because she asked questions about why there weren't history classes and information, why there wasn't information about the culture of African people and other people of color, and why the curriculum was so Eurocentric. She was suspended for this. She lived in a community where every day when she walked to school, she had to take a circuitous route because over here there was some gangbanging going on and it was dangerous to go through. Over there, there's violence. She's someone who has lost so many of her peers already at her tender age of 18 to gun violence. The same with Cameron. We find youth 17 who have lost 17 friends, gone to more funerals than you and I would have by the time that we're 70 or 80. So it's a miracle that they're standing here, that they're healthy, because they have come through so much. Thank you again for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be here. I want to honor the ancestors of this land, first of all, the keepers of this land. The Pomo, the Ohlone, and recognize that we stand on a colonized land. And I want to also just express the hope, and I think you pioneers would stand with me, that we walk this land in ways that honor them. Yes, thank you. That we walk this land in ways that bring about healing and wholeness and holiness, so that ways that bring devastation, discord, and domination will become a thing of the past. I want to greet you with a Zulu traditional greeting. Sawubona, sawubona. If I meet you in the marketplace, or I meet you on the road, I would say, sawubona, sawubona. And this means, I see you. I see your spirit. I see the gift that you are to the world. I see your authentic self. So much of our work is about seeing one another in this way, about seeing our youth in this way. That really sums up the work that we're doing in Oakland with youth, seeing them, even when they may be cursing us out, and just continuing to see them until they begin to see themselves, and until they begin to see who they truly are. So let me tell you just a little bit about my journey and how I come to stand here before you today. I was born during the segregation era in Birmingham, Alabama. The correct name, the official name is Birmingham, but it has since been known as Birmingham since the time of the 50s when I was growing up. I lived atop Dynamite Hill. That was the name of my neighborhood. It was called that because of all of the bombings that took place in our neighborhood for black families who happened to move in, pushing the color line. And of course, Birmingham was called that because of the many, many bombings of churches and of people like Reverend Shuttlesworth and others who were leaders in the civil rights movement. Two of my closest friends were killed in the Birmingham Sunday school bombing. And I want to honor them. I want to invoke their names right now. Carol Robertson, we honor you. Cynthia Wesley, we honor you. And all that I do today is in remembrance of you, to honor you. It's very sad when I see what's happening with our youth today. It was dangerous for me as a child growing up in Birmingham on Dynamite Hill. because of racial violence, the violence of the Ku Klux Klan. But the violence that our youth face today, the danger, the abuse, the trauma from structural violence, from police violence, from community violence, is just overwhelming. So I left the South as an angry warrior. I was involved in the civil rights movement. As Cameron said, I became involved in almost every major movement of the end of the 20th century. The Black Power movement, the Black Nationalist movement, and at one point, I was so anti-white that when my brother, who was in the National Guard at the time, brought a colleague home with him who was white, I stood in my doorway. You cannot bring him in here. Of course, who does that remind you of? That reminds me of George Wallace, right? Yeah, who stood in the doorway of University of Alabama to keep Arthurine Lucy from coming in. So I was filled with rage. I was a warrior for justice in a way that privileged anger and rage. And then my husband was almost killed by police when they invaded our apartment when we were working closely with the Black Panthers. My sister was put on trial for attempted murder and conspiracy because of something that happened right here, not far away in Marin County Civic Center. How many of you know about the prison rebellion back in 1970? Yeah, okay. So this was an early prison rebellion. George Jackson, who was then sort of the Malcolm X of the prisons, he was looked to across the world as a great leader. He was a member of the Panther Party as well. He had a younger brother, 16 years old, who almost all his life saw his older brother in prison. For $75, he was given a 15 to life sentence. He had already served 15 years. Jonathan became so frustrated about the possibility of ever having his brother free again that he attempted an escape. He went into a courtroom right here in Marin County Civic Center with guns under his trench coat. And he freed two prisoners who were there, William Christmas, Rochelle McGee, and he also took a judge, some jurors, and others as hostages, and they went out to a waiting van that's at that first arch. As you turn in, as you're coming into the Marin County Civic Center, you make a left. That very first arch to the left is where that van was. The Marin County Civic Center Sheriff's Department, the Marin County Sheriff's Department, rather, shot into the vehicle. That's their policy. No one gets to escape, even if there are hostages. As a result of that shoot in, not shoot out, that shoot in, Judge Haley was killed, Jonathan Jackson at the age of 16 was killed, William Christmas was killed, and others were wounded. So I just want us to be aware of this history that has to do with racism, history that has to do with mass incarceration, history that has to do with the prison industrial complex. We, the pioneers, are right here where it happened. Okay, just wanted to, yeah. So, going on to my life story, I reached a point where I felt out of balance. I forgot to tell you that I became a trial lawyer after my sister's case. I traveled around the world speaking for her and fighting for her freedom, and then I became a trial lawyer to fight racism in the courts. And after about 30 years of this, I began to feel out of balance, and I literally became ill physically, affecting the feminine organs. I intuitively knew that I was being asked to rebalance myself, to bring more feminine energies, more creative energies, more spiritual energies, and more healing energies into my life. And I synchronistically and serendipitously ended up in a PhD program in Indigenous Studies, which allowed me to study with healers all over the world, especially in Africa, and especially a Zulu healer by the name of Vusamazulu Credo Mutwa, my spiritual father. I studied with him and came back to this country, finished my dissertation in Indigenous Studies, couldn't find a job doing this wonderful healing work, and so, kicking and screaming, went back into the practice of law. But it's a good thing I did, because through lawyers and through my presence at a conference of lawyers, I was able to find out about restorative justice. Restorative justice is a justice that heals. You could say that our justice system harms people who harm people to show that harming people is wrong. Huh? And what happens? What happens is that harm replicates, it reproduces, it metastasizes, it begins to saturate our existence. That's so much of what we see around us. That is what, in part, has breeded the abomination of mass incarceration, of the prison industrial complex. This way of harming people who harm people, but we know that harm people go on to harm other people. Studies show that if you have experienced trauma, even observed trauma, if you don't heal that trauma, you're going to go on and hurt someone else or hurt yourself. And it goes on and on and on. So restorative justice recognizes this, rooted as it is in indigenous principles of healing and of reconciliation. And so it sees crime as damage, as harm to relationships. And justice, therefore, must heal that damage and repair that harm. So restorative justice seeks to heal the harm rather than replicate it. So when I found out about this wonderful healing justice, it was an epiphany for me, because I realized I could be the lawyer, the warrior, and the healer all at the same time. All at the same time. Yes. So it was an incredible moment in my own personal journey into wholeness. And that is the foundation upon which I do the work that I do today. So I went all over the world to restorative justice conferences. I found the leaders in the restorative justice movement. I devoured all the literature I could. I met Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who was the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa, which is a restorative justice-based process to heal the wounds of mass and structural harm. And I really wanted to go to Africa to do this work, to war-torn regions in Africa. And I was even promised a position, or not promised a position. Mbeki, who was the president at that time, said, "Oh yes, come, we need you. The people are knocking down our doors for this reconciliation work. Come, come." But did he ever offer a job? No. So I found myself frustrated. But then a friend said, "Fania, Oakland is Darfur. Oakland is those war-torn regions of Africa." Of course, Oakland is much, much more than that as well. But something rang a bell. I had another epiphany. So from there, we formed Restorative Justice for Oakland Youth. And our mission is to promote restorative justice principles and practices, policy and practices, systems change, and direct services in schools, the juvenile justice system, and in communities. And we've been doing this work for about 10 years. We had one school pilot starting in 2007 that succeeded in completely eliminating violence, in increasing test scores, in reducing suspension rates by 87%. Yes. And that got the attention of the entire school district, and within a couple of years, with some organizing by youth and these amazing outcomes, the Oakland Unified School District passed a resolution adopting restorative justice as official school policy. Thank you. Thank you. So this is an example of how we can not only do healing on interpersonal levels in our lives, but how we can create systems that are more healing and policies that are more healing. I think it's important to do both. And of course, for me, it can only be that way, given my history as being a warrior for social justice. So today, restorative justice is in 30 schools. That resolution didn't collect dust. The district has put its money where its mouth is. $2.3 million budget just for restorative justice with 40 employees. And now the Oakland Unified School District is looked at across the nation as a model of restorative justice, of school-based restorative justice. And I think I'm trying to see how much time I have left, but I believe I'm in my last 5 minutes. And I just wanted to, what's that? Oh, okay. There's a clock right in front of me. I got 3 minutes, okay. So just very briefly, I want to say this business of reducing suspensions and creating environments in schools where students can thrive is just so important. The reason that Cameron stood before you here today is because by the time he was in 12th grade, he finally came to a school where even though he was sagging, even though he was wearing a hoodie, even though he was grumbling, they embraced him. Before he had crossed the threshold of the school, the principal, the vice principal, even the school security officers, he came into the principal's office, and she looked at his jacket of 150 suspensions and multiple arrests, and she gave it to him and invited him to tear it up. Tear it up. Yes. And he thrived. He thrived. He graduated with a 3.7 average. And this is the story of many other youth. And the whole point is to use restorative justice to create these kinds of outcomes for not just Cameron, but for all youth. And it's so important to stop that cycle of suspensions. Because I think I said earlier, research shows that is the pipeline into prison. Your chances of being incarcerated triple if you're suspended one time. So finding alternatives to suspension is a great way to interrupt not only the racialized school to prison pipeline, but also racialized mass incarceration. So thank you again. It's my honor, and I want to acknowledge all of you who are doing healing work. You wouldn't be here otherwise. Yeah. And I think that what you're doing is just amazing, because history is asking us to become healers. Mm-hmm. History is asking us. We are so good at causing harm at every level. We are experts at that. And it's become clear on every level, ecologically, socially, on every level, that if we don't learn to become healers, all of us, not just the acupuncturists and not just the medical doctors and not just those who heal the human body, but history is asking all of us to become healers wherever we are. So I want to thank you for answering history's call so that we will have a future for the 7 generations to come. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.